Imagine earning twice as much money, yet somehow feeling poorer every single month. That's exactly what happens to thousands of people who move to San Francisco expecting a better life. The average cost of living there isn't just a little higher than most American cities. It can be well over double, depending on what you spend money on. Meanwhile, someone living in Omaha can enjoy a comfortable lifestyle while earning far less. So where does all that extra money actually go? Is it the rent, the food, the taxes, or something much bigger hiding in plain sight? By the end of this video, you'll understand why living in San Francisco can cost around 247% more than living in Omaha, and why millions of Americans still choose to live there anyway. The answer reveals how modern cities quietly change the way your money disappears. Most people think San Francisco is expensive simply because it's a famous city, but that's only a small part of the story. The real reason goes much deeper, involving housing, high-paying tech jobs, limited land, local taxes, and millions of people competing for the same space. On the other hand, Omaha follows a very different economic path, where homes are more affordable, daily expenses stay lower, and income stretches much further. That doesn't mean Omaha is automatically a better place to live, and it doesn't mean San Francisco isn't worth its price. Every extra dollar people spend in San Francisco buys something, whether it's career opportunities, access to major companies, or a unique lifestyle. But the biggest surprise is that many people earning six-figure salaries there still struggle to save money by the end of the month. We'll compare both cities category by category using real economic data so you can see exactly where every dollar goes. By the end, you'll know whether the higher cost of living actually makes financial sense or whether it's one of the most expensive trade-offs in America. Let's start with the single biggest expense that changes everything: housing. If you ask most people why San Francisco is so expensive, they'll probably give one simple answer: Silicon Valley. While that's partly true, the real story started decades before today's biggest tech companies became global giants. San Francisco sits on a narrow peninsula, surrounded by water on three sides, leaving very little room for the city to expand. Unlike many American cities that can keep spreading outward, San Francisco simply ran out of space much sooner. As more people wanted to live there, demand kept rising, while the number of available homes grew much more slowly. Then the technology industry exploded, bringing thousands of highly paid workers from around the world who could afford to pay far more for housing. That intense competition pushed home prices and rents higher year after year, affecting almost every other part of daily life. Restaurants had to charge more because employees needed higher wages to afford rent. Local businesses increased prices, service costs climbed, and even a simple cup of coffee became noticeably more expensive. This is why economists often say housing acts like the first domino. Once it falls, many other prices begin rising with it. To understand why San Francisco can cost nearly 2.5 times more than Omaha, we first have to follow the money to the housing market. If there's one expense that explains almost the entire gap between San Francisco and Omaha, it's housing. In Omaha, many middle-income families can still buy a home without spending their entire paycheck every month. In San Francisco, buying even a modest home often requires an income that would be considered wealthy in most parts of America. The same story appears in the rental market, where a small one-bedroom apartment can cost several times more than a similar apartment in Omaha. That means many people don't just pay more for a nicer home, they often pay much more for a much smaller space. It's common for roommates in San Francisco to share apartments well into their 30s simply because living alone has become too expensive. Meanwhile, families in Omaha are more likely to have larger homes, extra bedrooms, garages, and even backyards, while paying much less each month. But here's where things become even more interesting. High housing costs don't stop with your monthly rent or mortgage payment. They increase property taxes, insurance costs, maintenance expenses, and even the price of nearby businesses that also have to pay expensive rent. When a grocery store pays more for its building, those costs eventually show up in the prices you see on the shelves. The same thing happens to restaurants, hair salons, gyms, daycare centers, and almost every local service. Housing doesn't just affect where you live, it quietly affects almost everything you buy. That's why economists often call housing the foundation of a city's entire cost of living.
After housing, transportation is another expense that quietly drains your wallet, but not in the way most people expect. Many people assume living in San Francisco means you don't need a car because the city has buses, trains, and cable cars. While public transportation can reduce some costs, it doesn't make transportation cheap. Monthly transit passes, rideshare trips, bridge tolls, and parking fees can add up surprisingly fast. If you do own a car, the costs climb even higher because parking is limited and insurance is often more expensive than in smaller cities. In some neighborhoods, simply parking your car for a few hours can cost more than a full day of parking in Omaha. Omaha tells a very different story, where driving is easier, parking is usually plentiful, and daily commuting is often less stressful. Fuel prices and maintenance still matter, but the overall transportation bill is usually much easier for families to manage. Time is another hidden cost that many people forget to calculate. Long commutes, heavy traffic, and crowded transit systems can steal hours from your week, even if you aren't spending extra money. When you add both time and transportation expenses together, the real cost of living becomes much bigger than what's written on a monthly budget. And that's exactly why comparing salaries alone never tells the whole story.
Housing and transportation may grab the headlines, but it's the small daily expenses that slowly empty your bank account. Buying groceries, eating at restaurants, getting a haircut, or ordering coffee all cost more when businesses have higher operating expenses. Think about a neighborhood grocery store in San Francisco. The owner pays higher rent, higher employee wages, higher insurance, and often higher utility costs than a similar store in Omaha. Those extra costs don't disappear. They get built into the price of every item on the shelf. That's why the same basket of groceries can cost noticeably more, even if you're buying the exact same brands. Dining out follows the same pattern, with restaurants charging more to cover labor, rent, and other business expenses. Even simple services like daycare, gym memberships, pet care, or a haircut often come with a much higher price tag. Taxes also play an important role, although they're not always as obvious as a monthly rent payment. Income taxes, sales taxes, business taxes, and local fees all influence how much money people actually keep after every paycheck. Many residents focus on their salary, but what really matters is how much purchasing power that salary has after all the bills are paid. That's why someone earning less in Omaha can sometimes enjoy a lifestyle that feels richer than someone earning much more in San Francisco. In the end, it's not just about how much money you make, it's about how much money stays in your pocket. And that's the difference many people don't realize until they've already moved.
At this point, you might be thinking, people in San Francisco earn much higher salaries, so doesn't that balance everything out? It's a fair question, and the answer is both yes and no. Many jobs in technology, finance, and biotechnology do pay significantly more than similar jobs in Omaha. That's one of the biggest reasons people continue moving to the Bay Area despite its incredibly high cost of living. But a bigger paycheck doesn't automatically mean a better financial life. Imagine two software engineers, one living in San Francisco and the other in Omaha. The engineer in San Francisco earns a much higher salary, but also pays far more for housing, transportation, childcare, and everyday expenses. The engineer in Omaha earns less, yet keeps a larger percentage of each paycheck after paying the monthly bills. In other words, the first person earns more money, but the second person often has more financial freedom. Economists call this purchasing power, which simply means how much your income can actually buy after covering your living expenses. That's why companies often adjust salaries based on location, because a dollar doesn't have the same value everywhere. A six-figure income may sound impressive, but in one city, it can provide a luxurious lifestyle, while in another, it may only cover the basics. Looking at salary without looking at expenses is like judging a book by its cover. You only see part of the story. To understand why millions of people still choose San Francisco, we need to look beyond money and examine the opportunities the city offers.
So if San Francisco is so expensive, why do millions of people still want to live there? The answer isn't just about money, it's about opportunity. The Bay Area is home to some of the world's biggest technology companies, successful startups, leading universities, and major investors. For many people, living close to these opportunities can speed up their careers in ways that are difficult to measure with a paycheck alone. A casual conversation at a coffee shop could lead to a job interview, a business partnership, or even the next billion-dollar company. That's one reason ambitious professionals are willing to accept higher living costs. The city also offers cultural diversity, world-class restaurants, museums, beautiful parks, and famous landmarks that attract people from around the globe. For some residents, those experiences are worth paying extra for every month. But this doesn't mean San Francisco is the right choice for everyone. Someone focused on building savings, buying a larger home, or raising a family may find Omaha offers a better financial balance. On the other hand, someone chasing rapid career growth or building a technology company may decide the higher costs are a worthwhile investment. Neither decision is automatically right or wrong, because every person's priorities are different. The smartest financial choice isn't the city with the highest salary or the cheapest housing, it's the one that matches your goals. And that's the lesson hidden behind the 247% difference in living costs. After comparing housing, transportation, daily expenses, salaries, and career opportunities, one thing becomes clear. San Francisco isn't expensive because everything is overpriced for no reason. It's expensive because millions of people are competing for limited space and access to extraordinary opportunities. Every high rent payment, crowded apartment, and expensive cup of coffee is part of a much larger economic system driven by supply and demand. Omaha represents almost the opposite model, where lower demand and more available land keep everyday costs much more affordable. Neither city is objectively better, they simply reward different priorities and lifestyles. If your goal is maximizing savings, buying a larger home, or enjoying a lower financial burden, Omaha has a strong advantage. If your goal is building a career in industries that thrive in the Bay Area, San Francisco may still be worth the premium. The smartest financial decision isn't following where everyone else goes. It's choosing the place where your income, career goals, and lifestyle work together instead of fighting each other. Once you understand that, the 247% difference stops being a shocking number and starts becoming a valuable lesson about how cities shape your financial future. And that's a lesson that applies far beyond San Francisco and Omaha.